Here is an individual who writes, I tried one brand of low-carb tortillas last week. It states 0 net carbs. Supposed to be 14 grams of carbs total with 14 grams of fiber. So 14 grams of carbs minus 14 grams of fiber should equal your net carbs. And that is 0 in this case. And theoretically, no problems with blood sugar. Theoretically. He says the first couple of hours after eating them, there was only a slight increase in blood glucose. Then my blood sugar, jumped and stayed up for several hours. It seems their fiber was just a slow release, but eventually the carbs were still absorbed. I would say, yeah, amen. I think that's exactly right. In this case, I have a CGM, so I can see the long-term impact of some of these so-called keto or low-carb products. Yeah, you got to be careful. I believe there are times when the net carbs effect, the net carbs theory actually does work and shows you about how things are going to go for blood sugar. But there are times that you just can't believe everything you read. And many of the ways, the normal way that they take a bread product or a tortilla and make it low carb is they find a way to somehow cram and jam certain of these ingredients into a hard fiber. And I think it's exactly like this individual says. They do not release right away. And so if you only test yourself, your normal time for getting a peak of 1 hour, 1.5 hours, 1 hour, 15 minutes, you may find, yeah, baby, this works. But if you'll wait about 3 hours, and I've had this myself happen, if you'll wait about 3 hours, it'll suddenly jump up. It's like all that tightly packed fiber starts to unravel in your stomach. And then it starts to affect you like any normal carbohydrate would. So you may test it at 1 hour and it's like, well, I was at 105 and now I'm at 110. That's not bad at all. And then 3 hours after eating, or 4, suddenly it's up to 180, 200. It's just a delayed effect, which is no good. You don't want to just simply keep it down at 1 hour. You want it down, period. Now, I find that there are some brands that work better for me than others. So one thing you can do, and if you're testing a bread product specifically, maybe a low-carb keto sandwich bread or a low-carb tortilla, you'd better run a 3-hour post-test, 3 hours after eating, or 3.5 hours, just to make sure there's not this delayed effect. I would say in many cases you'll find that there is, but not always. So my 2 rules are, number 1, find a product, and there are different brands that work different ways. And I have found a tortilla brand that seems to work for me. It's called Extreme Wellness. Those tortillas seem to work for me. But I've had another one that I was shocked when I was testing like 4 hours later or 3.5 hours later, and my 1 hour test had been good, and about 4 hours later after eating, or 3.5, whatever it was up to like 185, and it's never like that. And I knew it was exactly how this individual described it. It was a delayed effect. Theoretically, 0 net carbs, 0 issues, 0 blood sugar rise, theoretically, but not actually. And so we need to get wise and let our glucose meter inform us about these things. And that's why, my normal thing is find out when you tend to peak, and that's when you test. So like for me, it's an hour and 20 minutes after eating, or an hour and 15. But with these bread products where they cram and jam stuff together and they make a fiber, and they call it, well, you've got 14 grams of carbs and 14 grams of fiber, so 0 net carbs. It doesn't work that way at all. Many cases. So again, test and find out. And my other rule is, if I'm ever using a low-carb bread or a low-carb tortilla, I've decided to limit it to 1 piece per meal, not 2. I just don't trust them. Even the ones that I've tested, I'm still nervous about them. They make me nervous. It's like, well, you seem to work. The tests seem to indicate that you're working for me, but I still don't trust you completely. So I'll just go with 1 low-carb tortilla, and after that, I'll just find other fillers for my meal, or 1 piece of bread. That's the normal way I do it. Maybe there might be a few exceptions, but not many for me. Okay, well, here is an individual who says, my brother-in-law had one leg amputated, the other foot amputated because he refused to alter his diet. Well, that is sad. I went keto, got off all meds for diabetes, and my high blood pressure went so low, the doctor took me off blood pressure meds also. Additionally, my inflammation and chronic nerve pain has improved. Thanks for all you do. My doctor said, just keep doing what you're doing. And I wish I had $1 for every time somebody reported that that's what their doctor said. Just keep on doing. Why would they say that? Well, you're getting results. You know, this person starts out by saying, I had a brother-in-law, he had a leg amputated, then he had a foot on the other leg amputated. He wouldn't alter his diet. And so many times people will write in things about my parents or my brother, my sister, my in-law, different people they know that had serious problems, amputations, early death, different things. And it's almost like we're on a battlefield when we get to a certain age. And for some, it can start as early as your 20s. But for most of us, it doesn't really hit us too hard until we're in our late 40s or early 50s. And suddenly you start seeing people drop all around you, kind of like an army unit that's under that's under fire, and they're seeing people drop all around them. And when you're seeing people drop all around you, it's time to act because you could be the next person to drop. So that's what this individual is implying. I saw my brother-in-law, it happened to him. I decided to go keto, and I got off meds for diabetes. I got off meds for blood pressure, and things are so much better. And the doctor took a look at his results and said, well, just keep doing what you're doing. There is an illusion about this whole process of our bodies breaking down metabolically. And the illusion is this: you can get by with it for decades. You can get by with it all through your growing up years. And most people, it's not going to lead to diabetes when you're a teenager, although there are type 1s where it normally will happen when you're young. But for most people, you get by through your teens. Most people, you can get by with it through your 20s. And when I say get by, I don't really mean that you're not being harmed. I mean you're not technically diabetic. Your A1C is not 6.5. So you feel like you're getting by, plus you feel good. You feel strong, you feel healthy. Maybe you're 50 pounds overweight, but you still feel good. And that your blood pressure is still okay, your blood sugar is still okay, your A1C is still fine. You seem like you're getting by with it. I don't really believe you're getting by with it. I believe there's a progressive breaking down that will eventually lead to some serious problems. Through your 30s, most people will still get by. I did. Through your 40s, many people will get through their 40s without being diagnosed as diabetic, without having high blood pressure. Not everybody. A lot of people, it'll start breaking down in their mid to late 40s, 45 on. But boy, I'll tell you what, in your 50s, that's when they stop dropping all around you. And you're looking around and you realize you're at that same age. And it can happen to you. So all this while you've eaten junk, and you're saying to yourself, well, I don't know why these fanatics are talking about junk food. I eat junk and I'm just doing fine. Thank you very much. Yeah, you are now. And if the human body was built to last 45 years, this channel would be meaningless. Most of us can make it to age 45 without too many problems. And if the average person just lived to 45 and pass off quietly from the scene, then we wouldn't have too much worries about diabetes, metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, and all these issues, amputations. But you don't live to be 45. Most of us are going to live to be in our 70s or 80s. And those last few decades, especially 50s, 60s, 70s, and maybe 80s, if you make it that long, that's when the problems hit. And you cannot just live for the first half of your life and say, everything's cool. My first half of my life is just fine. Well, what about the second half? And it's a pain when you're going through procedures and surgeries and having feet cut off, toes cut off, legs cut off, kidney failure, all kinds of issues. in your 50s or 60s. You can't just look back and say, well, thank God in my 30s I was fine. Well, so what? You're not in your 30s anymore. So you gotta figure on living to be an old person. I think about Mickey Mantle. Mickey Mantle, the baseball player, his dad died when he was something like 39 or 40. And Mickey was convinced he would die young. And he just lived a wild life, drank too much, ate junk, just didn't take care of himself at all. And he managed to live into his 60s, and then things fell apart for him. But he made this statement. He said, if I knew I was going to live this long, I would have taken better care of myself. My friend, most of you are going to make it into your 50s. Most of you are going to make it into your 60s. Most of you are going to make it into your 70s. But the question is, what kind of a quality of life will you have when you get there? Maybe you're just 25 right now, or 30, or 35. You're feeling just fine, fat and sassy. But what kind of a life are you going to have when you're in your 50s or 60s? You better think about that. People invest in retirement plans. And the idea is, I believe I'll get there to that age where I retire, and when it happens, I want to be taken care of. So even though you may be just 30 years old, you're already planning for retirement, and that's smart. But you should also think about staying healthy in those ages. Probably most of you know my wife Benedicta, but few of you know the amazing paths God has led her to bring her to where she is today. Benedicta was orphaned at an early age and lived with an elderly stepmother growing to adolescence. They were so poor, Benedicta had to drop out of school and sell food door to door for them to survive. As a teen, Benedicta got a job as a housemaid, which developed into a nightmare. She was required to cook, clean, wash, take care of the children, and she had to get up at 4 a.m. every day just to get her work started. Worse than that, she was frequently beaten. At around 20, she moved to the huge city of Lagos, where she started her own little business. Sometimes she prospered, but at other times she nearly starved and went days at a time without eating. At one point, she became so sick she passed out in her room and nearly died. She found herself outside of her body, and she was able to see the splendors of heaven until she was sent back with a command to share her story. One day, however, her life changed when an American evangelist came to her community to preach. And of course, that was me. The rest, as they say, is history. Benedicta has shared her life story in a recently published autobiography, and you can get it on Amazon as either an ebook or a paperback. A link to this book on Amazon is in the description.